Chapter 8. If These Cards Could Talk. Did you know? Topps used to give gifts to players in exchange for using their images on baseball cards. One year, Willie Mays complained about the toaster he received from Topps, saying it was burning his toast and asked if it could be repaired. About a year and a half before going to his house, I sold my childhood collection of Canseco cards. I came to this decision because my collection lacked direction. I was amazed at how few special cards I actually had, especially since I spent years stockpiling all the Canseco cards from the millions of cards I'd gone through. I had 50 of the same Topps base card, but not a single refractor, 20 1994 Pinnacle, but not a single artist proof. Stadium Club? You bet. First day issue? Nope. My collection lacked deeply in the parallel department. The intention was to one day create a checklist, see what all I had, determine what I needed, and do it right. Even though I'd gone through more cards than 99% of people in the hobby, I still came up short of having anything truly unique or special. The items that were most valuable to me were due to the memories attached to them. The 89 Fleer card that he signed on the cellophane wrapping I put over the card to protect it in its journey through the mail. The autographed baseball my grandparents gave me. The shirt I wore as a child to support Jose when he was traded to the Rangers. These were the things that were most valuable to me, perhaps only after realizing nothing else had much monetary value. Selling my childhood. After thinking about it, I realized the intangible memories attached to these pieces were far more valuable to me than the items themselves. In October of 2013, I listed my collection for sale on eBay for $999.33, or best offer. The shipping? $40.40, naturally. I took pictures of my binder, the box with doubles, 8x10s, plastic gas station cups, magazines, and everything in between. A few short weeks later, someone made an offer and ended up buying it all. I took the afternoon saying goodbye to my precious collection, packed it all up, and shipped it out. For the first time in my life since I was 9 years old, I found myself living in a home with less than 5 Jose Canseco baseball cards. Coming back to collecting Canseco. It didn't take longer than a couple of months for me to come back to collect his cards again. This time, though, I wanted to do it right. After a few key purchases using the funds from my old Canseco collection sale, I amassed quite a nice selection of die cuts, refractors, inserts, and others that I had never seen before in the millions of cards I had shuffled through over the years. This made it clear to me that assembling a world-class collection would not come from just throwing money at more cards. It would take a great deal of time and effort, being intentional and deliberate about collecting the right cards. I found out quickly that there were collectors of his who were willing to pay a small fortune for his rarer cards. Around the time I started back up collecting again, I saw an unimpressive looking 1-of-1 card with a small bat chip sell for over $450. This floored me. How could someone pay that for such an unimpressive card? I wanted absolutely no part of collecting 1-of-1 cards if that's what was going to happen. I planned to focus on cards I enjoyed looking at instead of highly valuable cards of him. That mindset did not last very long, though. Over the next several months, the hobby I loved since I was a child became more exciting to me than ever. I went from being a casual collector of parallels to purchasing a few collections from former heavy Canseco collectors, one of them being former Canseco super collector Paul. He had already sold off a number of key cards, but I was able to pick up a large portion of what he had. What came along with these cards were countless interesting storylines. To me, collecting is so much more than just pieces of cardboard with pictures of baseball players on them. Collecting is also about the thrill of the hunt, the camaraderie between collectors, and the stories behind the cards. Where did they come from? How were they acquired? A good example of this is a Top Spy back Canseco card I picked up. From the outside looking in, it's a $5 card at best. To me, it's worth so much more because of the story behind it. Gary Carter super collector Anthony actually pulled it from a pack with Lauren Shahadi on camera while they were on the MLB network, and he sent it to me for free. Within these collections I picked up were cards that had not seen the market for several years. These collections contained cards that were fought hard for. Some were picked up from intense trading sessions, and others were unearthed from tirelessly sifting through countless boxes at local card shows from back in the 90s. Still, others were picked up from chasing a lead online about certain mythical cards existing when no one else had known anything about them previously. I have a ton of appreciation for these cards and the history of how they made their way into my collection. Somewhere along the line, a switch was flipped, and I was no longer casually looking for cards that I thought were cool. I was intensely searching for any and all Canseco cards I didn't yet have. This happened when I realized that there were significantly more cards on my have list than on my want list. It was no longer about just getting the cool looking cards I had enjoyed looking at. A card could be as ugly as sin, and if I didn't have it, I'd want it. I still remember a couple of cards I lost out on while I was en route to Canseco's house. The fact that it hurt missing out on a few pieces of cardboard with Jose's picture on them while I was going to meet up with him shows you how much baseball cards mean to me. Perhaps all of this was the perfect storm for me to transition from a casual collector to a super collector. While I have many stories to tell about buying, selling, and trading, here are a few of my favorites. My first one of one. The catalyst for becoming a super collector might have started with my first one of one purchase. As a super collector, one of one cards are typically the most sought after, the best of the best. There can only be one of one, and there can only be one owner of said one of one. With stiff competition, I knew that getting even one of one was going to be hard to accomplish. A few short months after I came back from Jose's house, I landed my first. A 2015 Topps Tech Black Rainbow. I even remember where I was, at a stoplight on my way to church to pick up Atticus from youth group. The seller spelled his name wrong in the auction title, Consecco, and I was the first on the scene. With a few clicks, I was the proud owner of a one of one Jose Canseco. I was elated to have finally beaten all of the other big Canseco collectors. This was a huge deal because it seemed as though all of the good stuff was being hoarded by a group of 5 or so people, with no one else ever even having a chance. I had often wondered if there was going to be room for me to get any special one of one cards at all. The ability to purchase this card gave me hope. A Tale of Two White Whales. One day, a big-time baseball card collector named Bob reached out to me after reading an article I had just written. I enjoyed viewing your Canseco cards. One card I didn't see was the 88 Topps Cloth Experimental A's Leaders. Do you have that one? The question he posed was extremely exciting to me. Could he possibly have the card he was asking me about? I quickly wrote back and said I did not, asking if he had one available. After a while, he responded with something that knocked me back. The card is yours for free if you want it. Just send me your address. I'd love for it to be a part of such an amazing collection. I was beyond flabbergasted that this man would give me such an amazing card for free. After a while, he showed me another card stating, "Unfortunately, I only have one of these." He sent me a picture of a 1989 Leaf Blue Chips Canseco card. Though the 88 Topps Cloth was the oldest prototype card on my want list, I'd have to say I wanted this one even more. I wrote him immediately and he confirmed my suspicions. It was not for sale. I wrote him and asked if there was anything I could do to change his mind. He said no price would be possible to get him to part with it. A few days later, while Holly and Atticus were away from home, I received a knock on the door. I opened up, and it was the mail lady. She handed me a box, and I wasn't sure why because I wasn't expecting a package. I opened it up, and its contents stunned the living daylights out of me. It was the 1989 Leaf Blue Chips card. Thankfully, my family wasn't around to hear me squeal like a little girl. Bob sent me not one, but two amazing cards for my collection out of the goodness of his heart. Bob's generosity is something that our hobby desperately needs more of. I constantly hear about people in this hobby who try to scam others, so to remember Bob and his kindness is truly refreshing. I should mention also that Bob has an insanely amazing baseball card collection himself. If you ask me, he is more than deserving of every last card he has and a whole lot more. The bat knob that almost got away. 2016 was a monumental year for Conseco baseball card collectors because of the latest Topps release of Tier 1. It featured the first and only, at the time, autographed bat knob 1/1 card of Jose. Armed with a search engine and enough time, you can oftentimes find the exact game-used bat that was purchased by the card companies to cut up. If you're lucky, you can even find a picture of the player using said bat in a game to photo match it. I was on high alert for this card and was unsure of how much it would sell for, as nothing like this had ever shown up on eBay before because it was the first of its kind. The only thing I could compare it to was Conseco's first 1/1 button card that sold at auction in the $1,200 range a year or so prior, which I was able to acquire later. A few days after the product had released, I was waking up from a nap and checked my email. Well-known wax aficionado Kurt had just sold me a couple of Conseco cards and was writing me to acknowledge my email to him stating I received them safe and sound. Or so I thought. His email was a little different than I had expected. Did you get the 2016 Tier 1 Conseco Bat Knob Auto? I saw it just sold. What? I would have likely never known about the knob had I not emailed Kurt thanking him for the cards he sold to me. Feverishly, I checked the sold listings and I couldn't find it. After a while, I was able to locate it. It quickly became clear why my searches were unable to see anything. The seller had listed it under the name of Jose Canseco with G's instead of C's. The font that Topps used made it look like it was spelled that way. eBay did not show it as having been sold though. It just showed that the listing had ended, so there was hope. I reached out to the seller to ask if he had it available. I was excited to hear that he did still have it. We ended up agreeing on a price and a deal was made. Or so I thought. He told me there was a catch. He had already agreed to a deal with someone else, though the card was still in his possession. Because of this, he was willing to back out of the previous deal. When asked what the name of the buyer was, he spoke the same name of one of my biggest Conseco competitors. On more than one occasion, this competitor of mine reached out to multiple people I did deals with to try to buy cards out from under me, even though I had already paid. Could this be sweet payback? No, I couldn't do it. Even though I wanted the card badly, revenge did not sit well with me at all. Saddened, I declined to do such a thing, but as a last resort, I asked the last name of the buyer just to make sure. Much to my delight, it ended up being a completely different person than I originally thought. Not that it would have changed anything because I still wouldn't have purchased it out from under someone else, but perhaps the buyer would be willing to do a deal with me since he wasn't a Conseco super collector. I knew if it were my competitor, he would lock it up in his collection no matter what I offered forever. I reached out to the buyer and offered to send him money on the spot if he allowed me to purchase the card from the seller instead. He agreed and the card made it into my collection. It felt like a roller coaster ride to get it, and the cost of admission was high. Both the buyer and seller were paid very well, but it was well worth it for the clear conscience. Crusade Executive Sample. One day, I was perusing WorthPoint to see if any cards stuck out to me so I could do some internet sleuthing and perhaps figure out who the owners were. I found a couple of cards, and as it turned out, I knew who the seller was. I reached out to him, and he said he sold the cards long ago. After doing a little bit of begging, he looked through his sales records and was able to find out the buyer's contact information, even though the purchases were made years ago. The cards I found were green and purple parallels of 1998 Donner's Crusade. I already had the green and purple, but these were extremely special. They were executive samples, which meant that only one or two likely existed of each. I reached out to the buyer, and he ended up responding fairly quickly. We talked on the phone for a while and hit it off. He already knew who I was, but I had never heard of him before. That isn't uncommon for someone who may have a card or two I don't have, but this was much, much different. After talking to him, it sounded as though he may not only have just a couple cards I didn't yet have about, but 50. Simply put, this never happens. I do not ever run into someone who has more than a couple I don't yet have, so 50 was unreal, especially from someone whom I've never heard of before. To make sure there's no miscommunication, he sent me a high-quality video showing his entire collection, and sure enough, there were 50 legitimate cards I did not yet have. Among these cards were low-numbered parallels that had not seen eBay since before I had entered the collecting arena. I was truly dumbfounded. After looking at everything, I made an offer of $5,000 for his entire collection. I figured I'd be able to make my money back on some of the duplicate items. The conversation sounded very optimistic, as if it was about to happen. He told me he would think about it and get back to me. I had high hopes, but didn't hear back for a while. After a couple of weeks, I decided to check in, and he told me he probably could not do it. The reason? His wife. Never in all of the years I've been in baseball cards have I ever heard that the wife was the reason not to sell. He clearly has a keeper. He mentioned that while she wasn't completely against it, she definitely wasn't for it. I bumped up my offer by $1,000, and he said he would take time to think about it with his wife. With as promising as his first response sounded, this one sounded even better. A few more weeks passed by, and I checked in again. Sure enough, it was the same story. His wife didn't want him selling for what I offered. I was taken aback because I knew I was offering good money, but sometimes it just doesn't work out. Drastic times, however, call for drastic measures. I went through his video again to make a list of all the cards I didn't yet have. I determined that I could expect to pay $6,000 total if I were the winning bidder for all 50 cards at auction. I had gone from $5,000 for his entire collection to $6,000 for a mere 50 cards. If you're not a super collector, this will give you a glimpse into how our minds work. We see a bunch of cards we like and we make a good offer. We wait and wait and wait only to be turned down. Eventually, all we can think about are the cards we missed out on and offer unreasonable prices. Rejection breeds obsession. Now, mind you, $6,000 for those cards wasn't completely unreasonable, as I truly felt that's what they would have gone for on the open market. But I don't care who you are. That is a lot of money. That was how much my beloved 1989 IROC Camaro cost me when I was a teenager. And here I was making an offer of the same price for 50 baseball cards. This offer definitely piqued his interest, enough to pull each and every card and take a picture to make sure that we were talking about the same cards. Once more, he said he would talk it over with his wife, and once more I had to wait a little while. But that was okay, because if this wasn't a slam dunk, then I didn't know what would be. He came back to me apologizing for the wait and made a counteroffer. Since so much time had passed, I figured that would be the case. If I truly felt these cards were worth $6,000, then certainly I'd be willing to pay a bit more as a premium just because there were so many cards I needed in one spot. I was ready to play ball. At least I thought I was. The owner came back at me with a price of $18,000, triple the value of what I would expect these to go for on the open market. I was truly in disbelief and didn't know what to say. But when you have this type of opportunity, you absolutely have to go for it as a super collector. So I sent the total $18,000 that evening. Okay, I confess, I'm pulling your chain. I did not pay the $18,000. What I did was rack my brain trying to figure out how to get a deal done with someone who is trying to sell 50 cards at above one of one prices when very few were even close to being that rare. When I realized the deal wouldn't work out, I politely declined and we parted ways. Over the next several months, I would check in just to see where his head was at, but he wouldn't budge. When all said and done, I could probably say he was a mirror image of me in many ways. I have zero qualms with how he handled things and was glad to have met a truly nice fellow collector. It stung that we weren't able to get a deal done, but what can I say? You can't win them all. A year and a half later, I ended up doing a deal with him for the one card I was most interested in that caught my eye enough to seek him out in the first place. The 1998 Crusade Green Executive Sample. Pulling an all-nighter with ComC. Check Out My Cards, or ComC, is a well-known website that thousands of collectors flock to in order to fill holes in their collections, find deals, and flip for profit. While eBay gets much more traffic, ComC is definitely a website that you should keep your eye on. Every now and then you will see certain sellers list an insane amount of amazing cards. ComC doesn't give its users the luxury of being able to message each other, though that isn't necessarily a bad thing. As a seller, sometimes you just want to be left alone and list your cards for sale. If a buyer wants a card, they can either buy it or make an offer, and seller can either accept, counter, or decline. Simple as that. One seller that many collectors would love to get in contact with has an unreal inventory of obscure, backdoor, and prototype cards. One day, a collector reached out to me as a heads up to tell me a lot of super rare 90s cards were coming up for sale on ComC. I was on high alert because of this and I started visiting the website more frequently so I didn't miss anything big. One night after dinner, I remember haphazardly checking ComC on my phone. Nothing new was listed other than some base cards. I moved over to the sold section and my heart stopped. A 1997 Pinnacle Totally Certified Platinum Gold was sitting there. How could I have missed this card? Who got it? How much did it go for? All kinds of questions rushed into my head and I didn't know what to do. I had advertised all over the internet in hopes of landing this very card, stating that I would pay a $50 finder's fee just to be able to purchase it. There are very few cards that match its beauty. As I kept looking at the sold listings, I noticed a distinct difference between it and a few other cards. Others had sales data and this didn't. Is it possible that this wasn't sold, but rather just showing as sold because it was stuck in some sort of queue waiting to be listed? I had no idea if it was a fool's errand or not, but I wasn't going to leave ComC unattended anytime soon. Fellow cardboard enthusiast and Will Clark super collector Ryan noticed this as well for a few very rare Will Clark cards. We kept in touch over the next day to report to each other if any sold cards moved to the for sale section. I stayed up late that night on my computer doing nothing but wearing out the refresh key on my keyboard. I dug further into the sold listings and saw many other amazing cards I knew for a fact hadn't seen the active side of ComC. I felt that at any moment these cards could be listed, and for all I knew, there were 50 other rabid collectors who were obsessively hitting refresh at the same time I was. While I did get some sleep, it wasn't much. When I get fixated on something, I have a very hard time catching any Z's. I woke up very early and scurried over to my computer to begin a long day of playing Finger Meets F5. My wife walked in while I was doing this and was puzzled. Babe, what are you doing? I'm pinnacle hunting. Totally certified, baby. You have a problem, sir. Seek help. Clearly, she didn't understand what was at stake. Later on in the day, after hours of absolutely no movement, some Will Clark cards popped up. I notified Ryan, who was able to grab the cards he wanted on his phone while he was at the store. I was happy for him, but what about me? What about the cards I had been so obsessively searching for? Just like that, some new Conseco cards were listed. Some Leaf Executive prototypes, a 1-of-1 with its serial number missing, and others. Finally, the totally certified surfaced, also with no serial number. It's the only one I've ever seen without the numbering ever. I clicked purchase as quickly as I could and became the proud owner of the card I'd been dreaming of. Well, daydreaming, that is. When all was said and done, I was able to purchase every single card that showed up that day. Draining a product in 2 hours. By the time 2017 rolled around, I was firmly planted as the main Conseco collector for nearly a year. It seemed as though if anyone saw a rare Conseco, they would reach out to me more often than not. I would get multiple messages a day pointing me to all the best cards. It helped tremendously because I knew that I was positioned better than anyone else to get the first choice of whatever I wanted. When 2017 Tier 1 came out, I was excited because while having the only knob auto card from 2016 was great, having the only 2 knob autos would be better. Plus, they were also due to release a beautiful autographed barrel card. The picture of the cards that were showing up on eBay from other players were absolutely gorgeous, so I was on high alert. The thing with 1-of-1 cards is you never know if they'll be opened from a box in a day or 5 years. Even then, you're not guaranteed to see the 1-of-1 as it might be pulled and stuffed in a box in someone's private collection, never to be seen again. For the Conseco collector, the autographed bat knob and autographed bat barrel cards are highly sought after, so everyone would be gunning for them. Within a few days of the 2017 Topps Tier 1 release, I was notified of both cards and was able to do a deal for them with 2 separate sellers, all within less than 2 hours of each other. Sacrificing a wood card and a superfractor. As a super collector, you rarely, if ever, will sacrifice a 1-of-1, and certainly not a high-end 1-of-1. In 2015, collector Randy B. on the Blowout forums reached out to me to let me know that a 2015 Museum Wood Conseco card was pulled in a break. The Beckett checklist noted that this card was numbered out of 3, but after looking at the video, it was clear that it wasn't out of 3, it was a 1-of-1. This card was absolutely gorgeous. Constructed completely out of a thick piece of wood, the card, if you can call it that, was wrapped in a wood frame and topped off with a silver ink signature. The card was breathtaking. After a series of emails to and from the owner, I was able to acquire the card and counted it as one of my favorites. This card especially made waves in the Conseco collecting community because everyone wanted it. Who could blame them? For months, fellow Conseco super collector AJ kept begging me to do a deal with him for it by offering multiple 1-of-1s, other rare cards, and cash. I had no intention of selling though. This baby was staying in my collection forever. A few months down the road on a Wednesday night, AJ and I were on the phone in the middle of one of our epic trade battles, not including the wood card, of course. These trades would typically be drawn out for days at a time. I told him I had to go, but he insisted we stay on the phone until the deal was completed. I probably told him I had to get off the phone 2 or 3 times, but it was clear that there was no getting off the phone with him unless I hung up on him, which I wasn't about to do. Just then, in the middle of telling me it was important we stay on the phone to finish our deal, Canseco's first autographed superfractor ever popped up on eBay. I was able to purchase the noteworthy card while he was mid-sentence. Had he not stayed on the phone, it would have been very possible I would not have been able to get it. I decided to keep my mouth shut after the purchase and stayed on the phone to wrap up the deal with him as well. A few days later, he called me. "Did you buy the superfractor?" "Yep." Ugh. It was during our phone call, wasn't it? "Yep." A few months later, we started talking about the wood card and the superfractor, how he would love to get both cards in his collection, and how it was getting tiresome for him to continue chasing one-of-ones. After talking it through, I decided to sell him both cards for, you guessed it, $3,333.33. There was, however, a contingency. He would have to give up buying one-of-ones released from 2017 and beyond. I figured this would help me tremendously going forward. In the end, it worked out nicely because not only would I have less competition on one-of-ones going forward, AJ was able to secure the card he lost out on when we were on the phone. The biggest downside for me was that I no longer had my precious wood card. I set my hopes on being able to get the next one Topps would release, though there was no guarantee that would ever happen. A few months down the road, Topps started showing mock-ups of 2017 Museum. The digitally rendered pictures did not make it look like the wood cards were going to be made completely out of wood. They looked like they were merely going to have wood frames. This was hugely disappointing, but I held out hope, thinking that perhaps Topps didn't show a full wood version because they didn't yet have real pictures of them. A week or so before the release, the checklist I had been anxiously waiting for was posted. I quickly checked, and sure enough, Jose was going to have a wood card. Whether or not it was going to be a suitable replacement for the full wood card remained to be seen. When the set was finally released, I checked eBay to find any 2017 Topps Museum wood cards that were listed. I was excited to see that the wood cards were in fact 100% wood. It didn't take long for Jose's card to make an appearance on eBay. One morning while I was at my computer working, I was alerted to it being listed. A huge rush broke my mid-morning lull, and without even paying attention to the card itself, I clicked buy it now for significantly less than what I sold the other wood card for. I spent no time whatsoever to inspect the card, read the description, or anything. After I secured the card, I just sat there catching my breath for a while. What did I just buy? Was this latest purchase the single thing that would make selling my first wood card okay? Don't just sit there. Look at the card, Tanner. I went to my purchases section and stared at it for a while. Much to my delight, the card wasn't just beautiful, it was perfect. Everything about the card was significantly better than the one I had just given up. The wood was a darker finish. The picture featured Jose in a solid green jersey that was a close-up shot. The card was accented in gold holographic foil, and the card itself was signed in gold ink. Absolute perfection. This was, to me, a great ending to the story of the wood cards for Canseco. Thanksgiving in Legoland. Near the end of 2017, my family and I decided to spend Thanksgiving in Florida. The plan was to go to the beach in Legoland, with medieval times being our destination for Thanksgiving dinner. It was such a fun trip. The problem? Leaf announced they were going to release their new product during this time, 2017 Leaf Q. Within this set were 3 different types of Canseco cards, each with the biggest game use patches in recent memory and several parallels for each card. As a player collector, I was extremely excited about the 2017 Leaf Q release. I was even more excited given the fact that I already knew what they look like. Before their official release date, Leaf showed some examples via Twitter, and they looked absolutely gorgeous. The one card I was most excited about in particular was the 2017 Leaf Q Flashback 2015 one of one. In spite of it being an unlicensed card, it was perfect in every way. Discovering what this card looked like also ended a several months long mystery for me. I had picked up 3 printing plates from 2015 Leaf of a card that had never been seen before or released. As it turned out, the printing plates I had were of the flashback card I was so excited about. This card featured just the right amount of gold holographic foil to accentuate the best parts of the card, a perfect signature, and a jumbo patch. Not just any jumbo patch though. The largest green and gold elephant A's logo patch I had ever seen on a Conseco card. It was almost as if Leaf found a way around the logo licensing issue by featuring a massive patch that showed the A's logo right in the middle. They never printed the logo, they just let the patch do the talking, and boy did it ever. Scratch that. The logo didn't talk, it sang. Needless to say, I was on high alert during the trip, knowing that the card could be listed on eBay at any time. It could be while I was driving, getting gas, on a roller coaster, or cheering for the Knights that were putting on a show for us during Thanksgiving dinner. That specific card constantly popped up in my head while driving for several hours on our road trip. I'm not sure if I ever put that much brain power into another one of one before. When I was in the passenger seat of the trip, I would occasionally hop on my phone to peek in on some Leaf group breaks and chat with other collectors to see if anyone saw the beautiful one of one surface. Because the live video feed wouldn't work on my phone, I had to log into my computer remotely by using my phone and watch the breaks as if I were sitting in my office. It made me feel like a hacker doing all of this from the passenger seat of our car in the middle of nowhere. While it was fun to play computer hacker for a while, this card brought a lot of anxiety for me during the trip. Not just because it was a card I wanted or because it was a one of one. I had tons of cards I loved already and more one of ones of Conseco than anyone else on the planet. My anxiety was because it was this card. A card I had been dreaming about. For the super collector, the best card is not a specific card in your collection. It's the one you don't have yet that you seek to add to your collection. I feel it's important to not let feelings of entitlement take over because you aren't due anything. You simply cannot have it all, nor should you try. With all that said, I knew that if I missed out on it, I would not be happy. A few days into our vacation, while we were walking around in Legoland, my phone buzzed to notify me that a card was listed. I checked, and sure enough, there it was, on eBay, with a hefty price of $1,500. I couldn't just click buy it now. Instead, I made an offer for $1,000 and camped out on another page to see the other offers roll in. Anxiety crept in because it was such a special card. I knew it was highly possible one of my competitors could swoop in and hit the buy it now button. If that happened, the card would certainly not be let go of for anything, so it could be considered good as gone forever. Minutes later, I discovered that someone else had matched my offer, so instead of letting it go to chance, I hit the buy it now button myself. Thankfully, I had a coupon code to help on the price, and I became the owner of quite possibly the most beautiful Jose Canseco patch card ever made. I never thought I could love an unlicensed card as much as this. During the same trip, I was able to secure all 3 one-of-one Conseco cards from the 2017 Leaf Q set. The other 2 were gorgeous as well, but as with almost all other Conseco cards that have been made, they don't hold a candle to the 2017 Leaf Q Flashback 2015 one-of-one. 1998 Pinnacle Certified Prototype. When AJ and I first met online, he showed me some of the most amazing pieces of cardboard in his collection I had ever seen. One of which was the 1998 Pinnacle Certified Red Prototype. The card was beautiful, and sadly I'd never be able to own it. AJ had the only copy that had ever surfaced, and 99% of the collecting community had not seen another one of these for any player. This is because only a few were created before Pinnacle called it quits. One-of-ones are special. They're manufactured to be special. There's something to be said, however, about prototypes like the 98 Pinnacle Certified. They scratch an itch that one-of-ones simply cannot get to, as they were not manufactured to be rare. Being the owner of pieces like this makes you feel like you have something that you shouldn't. It's cards like these that haunt collectors for years. They are true unicorns and do not exist until they do. To me, the 98 Pinnacle Certified Red Prototype did not exist outside of AJ's collection. Until 3 years after he showed me, that is. It was a Friday evening, and I was about to head out of the office for the weekend, but decided to check eBay one more time, of course. What was in front of my eyes made my heart stop. It was the beautiful Pinnacle Red Prototype. Starting out as a 99-cent auction, my heart raced, and I made plans to make it mine no matter the cost. If there was one card worth going all in for, it was this one. Normally, I wouldn't talk to other collectors about a card I was going for, but knowing that AJ already had this, I reached out to share my excitement. AJ, did you see the card on eBay? I'm so excited. I'm about to join the club. Tanner, I don't have that card. This isn't the red. It's the mirror red. My heart sank as I knew this was going to be quite a costly acquisition if I was ever going to win the card. I wanted to get my hands on my first 98 Pinnacle prototype, a version of it that had never been seen before, and AJ wanted to get his hands on it to match the one he already had. Since we did a deal previously where he had to stay away from the new one-of-one cards, this was a lot more appealing to him. This was definitely going to be an uphill battle, but I was up for it. I checked the listing constantly to see where the bidding was at, and it didn't move much initially. Sunday afternoon, the worst thing possible happened to this card. It disappeared from eBay. Extremely frustrated, I reached out to the seller, who was unresponsive. The card was on my mind quite a bit that evening as I was driving to pick up Atticus from youth group. I kept thinking to myself, how can I find a way to reach the seller if he isn't responding to me through eBay? I knew the seller was in the Dallas area, and though he too was in Texas, it was about 4 hours away from me. I tried to think of anyone I knew in his area that had to do with cards. After thinking about it for a while, I remembered a guy who came down to the Houston area to purchase a few 100,000 cards from me a couple of years prior. He mentioned he was from the Dallas area, so I figured I'd give him a call. After finally remembering his name, I was able to search my phone for his number and called him. I asked if he remembered me, and he did. Dallas is a huge place, and to ask if he knew the person who listed the card would be a 1 in a million shot. But it was my only shot, so I had to try. Have you ever met someone from another state and asked them if they knew your friend from the same state by their first name? I've done that before and spoke the words without even thinking about how absurd it sounded. Something like, "You're from Ohio? Hey, I know someone from Ohio. Do you know someone by the name of Matt?" I never once thought about how many thousands of people named Matt that may live in Ohio. Well, this time it worked. I asked if he knew the seller, and miraculously he did. What are the odds of that? He gave me his contact information, and I was able to have a conversation with the seller. It did not go well, though. My worst nightmare was confirmed. He sold the card offline. There was no going back. The card was as good as gone. The guy I knew from Dallas reached back out to me a day or two later and checked in with me, asking what I was looking for. I told him it was a Canseco card. What card, he asked. I told him it was nothing he would have ever seen before, a 1998 Pinnacle Certified Mirror Red prototype. I wish you would have asked me to begin with, Tanner. I think I have it. Give me a week and I will get back with you to see if I do or not. My excitement meter didn't move off of 0 because I was certain he was talking about the common 97 version. This often happens to me. People will look at my want list and excitedly proclaim that they have something I need. It almost always ends up being a common base card or another common parallel. I didn't tell him this, of course. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that you leave no stone unturned. Plus, to get to this point seemed almost like a miracle. I had to continue down this path as far as it would take me. I told him I'd love to see a picture when he could send it. A few days came and went, along with a few what-if daydreams about the card. Later on in the week, he gave me a call. Check your texts. I just sent you a picture. He had it. Not only that, but he also had the base, mirror blue, and mirror gold, as well as the red that I always loved so much that AJ had. Within an hour, we did a deal for the entire set of cards. Not only was I beyond excited that I was getting the entire run, I was so unspeakably shocked that the one person I reached out to had a card I was targeting. A card that, to the general collecting public, didn't exist. Had a deal not been done offline with someone else for the original card, I would have never seen the others. It truly seemed like divine intervention for this all to work out the way it did. I still cannot believe how it all worked out, but my collecting journey is riddled with all kinds of stories like this. Yes, collecting is fun, but eventually the cards just end up in a box. The experiences and stories themselves can sometimes be even more exciting. Every card has a price tag, but the memories made because of them are priceless.